Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, CaBA webinar with a TalkStreams strategy update. If you don't know me, and you may not, because I think attendance is set to be quite high for today's session, my name is Rebecca Duncan. I'm the Media and Events Lead at the Rivers Trust, and I'm also involved with the CaBA National Support Group. So I'm here just to start proceedings today, just to run through a few of the housekeeping points that we operate on our webinars. First things first, we've got closed captions available on the webinar, which you can enable by clicking the CC Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can also use that to adjust the size if you need. We have a Q&A at the end of today's session, and we've got the Q&A function that you should also see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So please submit your questions that way. You can submit throughout the webinar, and then our panelists will endeavour to answer as many of those as possible at the end of the event. If you've got more general comments, please share those in the chat. And we're also going to be running a few polls, so please do get as involved as you feel comfortable doing. Finally, just a note that the webinar is being recorded. As attendees, you're not on screen, but we will be circulating the recording afterwards via email and also on the CaBA website and newsletters. So I will ask now Alison Matthews, who's a colleague of mine at the Rivers Trust, to come and start us off. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Becca. Hi, everybody. It's fantastic to see so many people sign up and attend this event. We're really pleased that there's such an interest in it. So my name's Alison Matthews. I am the TalkStream Restoration Strategy Programme Manager, and I'm based at the Rivers Trust. And before I introduce the others that are going to join us on the call, we wanted to run our first poll just to find out who's actually on our call so that we can get an idea of who's interested in what's going on in the TalkStream world. So if you are happy to, please could you just add, yeah, fantastic, you're already all on it. Be great to see what sort of people we've got here. And if we haven't got your organisation represented, or you feel that you want to put something in a chat about who you are, then feel free to do that. It's looking good. So whilst you're filling that in, I'll just introduce who's going to be talking to you and what we're going to be covering. So we've got quite a lot to get through in an hour. For those who know me, I'm always quite ambitious as to what I can achieve in an hour. So let's hope it works. So the first person we're going to have presenting to you is Rob Collins. He's my boss. He works at the Rivers Trust as a Director of Policy and Science, and he's here really in capacity as the chair of the National Support Group for CaBA, the Catchment Based Approach, which our working group sits in. He's going to hand over to Charles Rangeley-Wilson, who many of you will have heard of. Charles has been doing TalkStreams for an awfully long time. He is the chair of the CaBA working group, has a huge amount of experience, so he's going to talk us through a bit of the history and what's been going on recently. He's going to hand over to Ali Morse. Ali Morse works at the Wildlife Trusts, and she's the vice chair of the CaBA TalkStream group. And she's going to talk to us about how we work across lots of different organisations to really amplify our messages to protect chalk streams. And then with whatever time they leave me, I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about some of the things that I've been doing in the last few months since I started in April. And then I'm going to conclude by asking you a few more questions about how we can build a community of people who care about chalk streams. And then I'm hoping we have a little bit of time left over to cover probably the most popular Q&A, the popular questions. So I think Becca said you can kind of like vote for the questions you think you most want us to answer. So please do that too. And we'll pick out the ones that have got the most votes and answer a couple of those, see what we can get through before we conclude. So we're due to finish by 10:30. We'll try and keep to our time. And hopefully it's going to be a really interesting morning for you. So with that, let's have a look. Let's end the poll then, Becca, if we could. And let's see what sort of people we've got. Aha, as expected. So it looks like we've got a lot of DEFRA arms length. So welcome to all of them. Yep, and lots of colleagues in Rivers Trust and Wildlife Trust. That's fabulous. Nice to see a good smattering of water company people here. Welcome to them too. And local authority, fabulous. Consultants, some, and a few academics too to keep us straight. So that's a really good mixture of people. So oh yeah, nice to see from Richard. Hello from SSD, my old area in the Environment Agency. Hi to them. So with that, perhaps I could hand over to Rob Collins to give us the introduction to what CaBA is and a bit of background information on that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alison. Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen a sec. Hopefully you can all see that. Could someone just let me know you can see that slide okay?
Yep, that's fine, Rob.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Alison. Good morning, all. Yeah, I'm Rob Collins. I work for the Rivers Trust, but as Alison said, I also chair the National Support Group for the Catchment Based Approach, or CaBA for short. And I'm aware, looking at that poll output, that a number of you probably are aware of the Catchment Based Approach. You may be part of a partnership, but I think several of you won't be. So I think it's worth giving this very brief overview and reiterating the sort of the ethos of CaBA, the collaborative approach, can really help to underpin chalk stream restoration as well. So CaBA was established more than 10 years ago, and in recognition that top-down regulation gets you only so far in terms of management of land and water, that to maximize all the benefits that can be achieved, you need to sort of widen that engagement out across the whole of society. And so for more than a decade now, we've had around 106 river catchment partnerships encompassing the whole of England and cross-border with Wales. So you can see them in the map there. And they are a diverse mix. So they do bring together, and I should say, actually, CaBA still remains globally unique. You can find collaborative water management elsewhere in a piecemeal way, but not encompassing the whole of a nation. And we've got a diverse mix of partner organizations. So you've got civil society and NGOs within that. So Rivers Trust, Wildlife Trust, Groundwork, and so on. A lot of public engagement, Environment Agency, Natural England, local authorities, some of whom actually fund partnerships, and the private sector. So we have got water companies, but we've also got a whole range of businesses, multinational in some cases, local in others. And we know each year we ask the partnerships to tell us all about their work for the year. What have they been up to? How their governance, and so on. And so we're able to sort of track the direction of travel of CaBA. And what we know is that the partnerships are really strong in providing convening power. So some of them are excellent at bringing delivery on the ground, but others are very strong too on convening power, bringing stakeholders together, which is a really important element of this. And they pool resources and expertise, and have proven adept at also leveraging additional funds. So all partnerships get a modest amount of funding each year, but they, on average, are able to leverage that by more than 3 times. And we know there's a huge amount of delivery undertaken across the partnerships nationwide. So that encompasses both the rural and urban environments. And you can see here in the photograph, natural flood management, but also there's a lot more that goes on in the rural environment around nature-based solutions, engaging with farmers, particularly around diffuse pollution and so on. But also in the urban environment, a whole number of features, wetlands, for example, with multiple benefits. And one of the big wins, I think, for CaBA has been the building of social capital. So virtually all partnerships nationwide have links into their local community, volunteer opportunities, but increasingly citizen science opportunities, so helping to build the local evidence base. And they all come with a catchment plan, so collectively coming together and identifying priorities for action. And a good third of them now, and I've put the test and itch in, as you can see here, have their own some form of shared online platform, or a story map, where they set out a narrative around particular issues and challenges and the action that's being undertaken. So there's a lot going on there, and I appreciate many of you on the call won't necessarily just be from CaBA partnerships or further afield, but the point I want to make really is this, that through that collaborative effort, there's real empowerment. And I think, we can take this energy and interest and enthusiasm for chalk streams and really take advantage of that and drive forward restoration. Thank you very much. Oh, just to say, I forgot my crucial piece here that I'll now hand over to Charles Rangeley-Wilson, who chairs the CaBA Chalk Stream Working Group.
Do I turn? I turn on my audio and video. Right. I thought you were turning that on, Rebecca. Apologies. Can everyone hear me? All I can see is myself, and I have no idea if I'm actually talking to anybody.
No, we can hear you, Charles.
Wonderful.
You could share your screen as well. That'd be fabulous.
Excellent. Going to share my screen. There we go. Okay. Hopefully that will share. Brilliant. I think I'm on target. Okay, technology is vanquished. Hi, everybody. Great to see such a big crowd here. Many names I know. I had really no idea who I was talking to today, but I know a lot of you. So hello, everyone I know, and hello, everyone I don't know. So I've been asked to do a little bit of a history of how we got to where we are now, of the TalkStream strategy. So some of this will be familiar to some of you, and some of you will actually have heard me say these very same things before, but many of you won't have. So hopefully it'll all be interesting. So, right, back in 2020, I was asked by Mark Lloyd and Sarah Powell to help convene and chair. Sarah Powell was at the Environment Agency in Richard Handley's post, TalkStream manager, to help convene a CaBA TalkStream restoration strategy. I was very aware at the time that we'd had many over the years, action plans and charters for TalkStreams, and I'd been involved in campaigning and for them and writing them, and I very much wanted this one to be an action plan, and sort of insisted that would be part of the brief, not just more paper gathering dust on a shelf. I hope we have managed that, and I hope we will continue to manage that. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But so what is the strategy? It's a strategy and a set of recommendations for how to restore good ecological health to the unique chalk streams of England, and crucially to the landscapes which support them. So it is looking at the chalk stream habitat at the large scale as well as the close scale. And I think what distinguishes it from all of the charters and action plans and state of English chalk streams reports and so on that had preceded it is it was the first truly sort of collaborative cross partnership approach, in the sense that it wasn't just ENGOs addressing government, it involved government. So it represented a collaborative approach between regulators, industry, NGOs and stakeholders. Why do chalk streams even need a restoration strategy? Well, it's because they're globally unique. As we all know, there are only so many chalk streams in the world, and most of them are English. There are some in Normandy and some in Denmark, but the majority are in South and Eastern England. They're culturally and historically very special as well. And because they are one of the most biodiverse, if not most biodiverse, of English river types. Rheophilic flow-loving ecology in a lowland landscape. Supporting species, iconic species like Atlantic salmon, as well as brown trout, native crayfish, water voles, etc. Ranunculus as well, which is also a key chalk stream species. But also because they are under intense pressure. Chalk streams flow through the most urbanized, industrialized, and intensely farmed parts of the UK. This is a little resume of the pressures they are under. We all focus on sewage nowadays, and it is indeed a significant pressure. I have a picture for that, but it's not the only one. Mills and barriers, which were put up from the late Middle Ages onwards. And in fact, before that, we had deforestation 4,000 years ago, which had a significant impact. Dredging and embankments, locking chalk streams down in canyons and prisons, canalizing them and straightening them. That little slide bottom left, black and white, modern River Nar red line, 17th century River Nar Wrigley blue line. It's roughly half as long as it used to be. Ditching and drainage. We've extended the pathways, the hydrological pathways of our chalk streams incredibly. And then if you add to that the road network, it becomes very significant difference from what we had naturally. Abstraction. We denude them of their natural flows for public water supply and industry. Sewage, they take the sewage we discharge either legally or illegally, as sometimes raw sewage discharges, which obviously everyone knows about because it's in the news, but even the legal sewage discharges, especially from the small sewage treatment works in headwaters where there's no phosphorus removal, they cumulatively are very, very significant because that load rises in summer as flows diminish and biological activity is at its height. Not to be ignored. Farm runoff, very, very significant if you combine that with the road network and the draining and the ditches that I've already alluded to, and the invasive species, which sometimes on their own can destroy a chalk stream. Himalayan balsam or signal crayfish can do the work of zillions of cows in terms of damaging riverbanks. And sometimes, as if that's not enough, we just bury them underground because they're kind of in the way. So chalk streams need a strategy to rescue them from these immense pressures. Who was involved in the collation of the strategy? Well, as I said, it was a truly collaborative effort. So we had a main panel, which involved the regulators, all of the regulators, the Environment Agency, Natural England, Ofwat, industry, NFU, and all of the water companies, the relevant water companies who occupy the chalk areas, and all of the main ENGOs on the main panel. An expert panel of academics and practitioners helping to navigate some of the recommendations about thorny issues like integrated wetlands, for example, which may be something people will raise in this meeting. I know that's or the role of beavers, these sorts of things. We had the wider community of stakeholders, literally hundreds of individuals, landowners, and river groups, all of whom were consulted. We had over 100 responses to our consultation before the final report was issued, and that consisted of a consensus strategy with 30 plus recommendations, about 10 per unit, which I'll talk to in a minute, for policy, legislation, and action. The recommendations to DEFRA, industry, and ENGOs, but also to ourselves. That was launched in October 2021 after about 15 months of work. How was it structured? This is the really key idea. It's built on a trinity or a bar stool, if you like, Mike Blackmore's readaptation of the idea of ecological health. And the point is that you need to improve all three to get the most cost-effective gains. You can spend a lot of money reducing abstraction, but if the water's still filthy, you'll only get so much of a benefit. You can spend a lot of money reducing abstraction and cleaning the water, but you'll only get so much benefit if the habitat is greatly modified and impounded and full of silt and so on. But if you do all three, then each one magnifies the cost effectiveness of the other. They add up to a healthy chalk stream. And when you are talking about the large sums of money and investments involved in things like abstraction relocation or upgrading sewage works, you do want cost effectiveness to win the day. So the recommendations covered things like actually agreeing what we mean by sustainable abstraction, reviewing and revising the assessment points in the WFD process so they properly reflect the condition of the river. Some instances, the WFD status does not reflect the condition of the river. I'm thinking of the Ivel especially, and therefore you don't have the driver to effect change. Upgrading sewage treatment works in small headwaters, not really made much progress there, but it's very, very significant. The use of integrated wetlands, improved farming rules for chalk streams, knowledge sharing, physical habitat restoration, and principles of physical habitat restoration and techniques. And of course, the one big wish, which you may all be familiar with, which is really the consensus opinion was to effect real and lasting improvements. Chalk streams need a greater level of protection and investment. Alison has been preparing a map recently, a wonderful map showing the status of sewage treatment works in terms of geographical spread. But that little chart on the right shows roughly the same thing, which is for the SAC chalk streams, nearly 90% have phosphorus removal at the sewage works, or sorry, nearly 90% of sewage works feature phosphorus removal on SAC chalk streams. Triple SI, as you can see, is 65. All other chalk streams is 30. But for chalk streams outside the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive catchments, it falls right down to below 18. So it really does make a difference. Even though some critics have said it doesn't, it does. By the time we published the strategy, we didn't have time to sort of actually itemize all of the actions that were going to be taken, and most particularly to commit to a timeline. So we needed another year for that, and also building into it the key iterative process, which is the implementation plan, which is designed to be published every few years and become a bellwether for progress. And this is really key because it will hold us all to account. So the way it is structured, there is one, if you look at that web link there, you will find it, but just Google ChalkStream's implementation plan and it'll be top of the the Google search thing. But the key is the progress arrows. They are designed to hold us to account, because if that red cross appears each time we publish the plan, we know that there's a problem. We want it to be at least green progress arrows, and some of the things will be works in progress for a long time. And ultimately, we want the whole implementation plan to turn blue with ticks, and then we can go back to the drawing board and work out what we need to do next to make things even better. So it featured, the implementation plan, for example, featured our flagship project network with updates from all of the water companies involved in the flagship projects. That's a little resume there from Affinity Water, but we have flagship projects as part of our strategy on 10 chalk streams. The River Chess, which is being supported by Thames Water and Affinity, the Bean, which is an Affinity Water project, the Froome Headwaters, which is Wessex Water, the Pang, which is Thames Water, the Driffield Beck, which is Yorkshire Water, or they call it the Hull Headwaters. I call it the Driffield Beck, but there are many, many chalk streams up there, of course, all part of the same system. The Lark, which is Anglian Water, the Anton, which is Southern Water, and the Ems, Portsmouth Water, the Granta, which is Cambridge Water, and the Great Stour, which is South East Water. But of course, these projects are not just water company projects. They're really supposed to be grassroots projects, catalyzed and supported by the water companies. And there's some really, really interesting progress happening there. That's the geographical spread. And the point of these flagship projects is you can't actually enact the whole strategy in one, right across the map by the day after tomorrow. It takes time. So having a national network of flagship projects where we do try to accelerate the process and effect that trinity of ecological uplift is to demonstrate the art of the possible, exemplar projects to encourage activity all over. So what has the CaBA Chalk project catalyzed thus far? I said earlier that we wanted action. Just checking my watch, I've got 2 minutes. So agreed definition of sustainable abstraction, tick. We have reviewed the abstraction sensitivity bands. There were some real anomalies there. Chalk streams have, the EA has now reviewed that. Chalk streams are agreed to be ASB 3. Reach scale assessment of abstraction pressures through new modeling, which is showing on a reach scale the sort of abstraction pressures as opposed to a generic whole catchment at the assessment point, which can be quite inadequate sometimes. Chalk streams as a high priority in the revised national framework for water resources. That is key. That is where it's all happening in terms of abstraction reduction. Chalk streams first as a concept on the Colne, it is happening, and possibly on the Lee and Ouse chalk streams where it's eminently possible. Chalk stream regions defined as water stress, enabling the rollout of smart metering. High priority in the DEFRA storm overflow discharge reduction plan, which has also had its critics, but it is a plan in my view, and therefore better than nothing. Commitment for National Highways and UK Road Leadership Group, that's a recent one, but they've committed to update their technical guidance. Chalk streams in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, research and knowledge sharing, a network of flagship projects, and now joining the fray, the landscape recovery projects on a number of chalk streams. I think they're going to be really, really interesting. I'm obviously very excited about the ones in Norfolk. So finally, DEFRA's, the one big wish. Well, at the launch of the implementation plan, and a shout out here for ex-Minister Rebecca Powell, who also had her critics, but she was a passionate supporter of this chalk initiative. And even now I'm getting messages from her asking about what we're doing and seeing where she can support in terms of talking to the press and so on. So she did a really good job. This was her initiative, the Chalk Stream Recovery Pack, as the answer to our one big wish. It wasn't like a designation, but it was supposed to incrementally address that. And these were some of the actions we were hoping to put in the recovery pack. Vice Chair Ali Morse and myself worked on this over something like 9 months, but it was effectively finished by December last year when it had been promised. It then went into a sort of holding pattern for months on end until the election was announced. And very sadly, it has been shelved. I don't know why. I want you all to ask and to cause a fuss about why, because there was some really, really good stuff in there. And I think it's a very great shame. There was action there to sort of have direction for no less than good on all chalk streams in terms of flow, to create policy drivers for phosphorus reduction from those descriptive works I'm talking about, septic tank regulation, improved farming rules for water, highways, restoring physical habitat with research, supporting research and best practice. So all sorts of good stuff. There'll probably be some questions about that. Very happy to take them. So what's next? Well, a mosh pit of beavers is my suggestion for an excellent government policy. But meanwhile, I am going to focus on busting chalk streams out of jail, taking a cue from another Irish rock singer, Phil Lynott, the jailbreak, because I think that this is one of the most significant things we can do for chalk streams and one of the most underestimated things. They are all locked in prisons through physical modification, and this is not necessarily held back by any of the awkward discussions around abstraction relocation or water treatment. We can get on with this. It is enormously effective. I've seen how effective it is myself. So I'm going to hand over now to Vice Chair Ali. And Ali is also chair of the ENGO subpanel of our CaBA Chalk initiative. So Ali will talk about working with all the collaborators and players that you need in order to affect some of these actions and policies on the ground. So that's enough from me. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Charles, and good morning all. As you've heard, I am Ali Morse, Water Policy Manager at the Wildlife Trusts. And I'm going to talk to you this morning about the work that we are doing as environmental NGOs, many of whom are active in chalk stream delivery, to also try and influence the policy to ensure the best outcomes for chalk streams. There are two key routes that we're using for this work, one of which is Blueprint for Water, and the other is the CaBA Chalk Streams strategy work. So to start with Blueprint. Now, you may not have heard of Blueprint because we're not an organisation in our own right, rather we are a collective. And our members include all of those organisations whose logos you can see on the screen, as well as others that have joined us more recently, including Sustainability First and River Action. And what we try and do is speak with a common voice when we engage with policymakers, government, DEFRA, and so on. We don't want to go to them as individual organisations saying 26 or so similar but slightly different things, because that's incredibly confusing and frustrating for policymakers. So we aim to talk to them collectively and ensure that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Back in 2021, we published our vision for the future of England's waters. And that was timed to work around the latest cycle of river basin management planning. And our key themes within that vision were to restore biodiversity, to reduce pollution, and to reshape our relationship with water. And at the same time, we also published our environmental manifesto for the price review PR24, which is the water industry planning process that will set out what the sector will deliver for chalk streams, amongst other things, for the period 2025 to 2030. So those two documents have really formed the sort of framework of how we as environmental NGOs have engaged over policy issues. And you would be forgiven, as Charles said, for thinking that sewage was the only issue affecting our waters. And certainly Blueprint and its individual members have been very vocal about sewage issues. But we're also concerned about water quality more broadly. and also water quantity, from drought at one end of the spectrum to flooding at the other. And indeed, we try and ensure that our policy advocacy work is evidence-driven. So, for example, the Environment Agency data on reasons for not achieving good status against the Water Framework Directive, we can see that pollution from agriculture is a really significant issue alongside that from wastewater. And that, as well as changes to flow levels when it comes to rivers and chalk streams in particular, we should also be concerned about physical modification, about invasive non-native species, and about urban pollution. So these are all areas that we pick up on through our policy engagement work. And whilst we do undertake press work and write press releases, we also use a whole host of other techniques which are a bit more behind the scenes to try and influence the policy and the delivery of government and various other organisations. So we publish documents and write policy briefings. We engage with the development of legislation as it's passing through Parliament. We respond to consultations, we write letters and all sorts of other things to try and advocate for the policies that we want to see being put in place for chalk streams and for other rivers too. So Blueprint is one of the key ways in which we've been engaging around chalk stream policy. And the other key route that we use is through the CaBA chalk stream restoration strategy work itself. As Charles mentioned, there were a number of ENGOs that sat on the original chalk streams restoration group itself. And so those NGOs, along with others from local to national organisations, continue to meet behind the scenes in a sort of unofficial or informal ENGO subgroup, which sits alongside a series of expert panels that are taking forward the main work under the CaBA strategy. And the reason that we do this alongside those other groups is partly to ensure that we're thinking about any crossover between the expert panels that are taking on the work around those three legs of the stool that Charles mentioned: water quality, water quantity, and physical habitat. And also because we can't necessarily use the main CaBA group itself to advocate for policy change because of the membership of that group. So, for example, that group as an entity can't respond to a DEFRA consultation or an Ofwat consultation because it includes those organisations themselves. So we can do work around those policy areas through the ENGOs as a subset of CaBA advocates. And so, given the absence of the chalk stream recovery pack, as Charles mentioned, we've been looking as the ENGOs about how we can best drive forward some of the actions in the CaBA chalk stream strategy. Some of those are actions that can just be progressed and undertaken, whilst others require policy or even legislative change. So which are those that we can push at the moment, and how can we use current advocacy opportunities to do that? So we undertook a quick analysis of progress with the chalk stream restoration strategy actions. And as Charles mentioned, many of those are either complete or underway. Those which are ongoing, some of them need a bit of pushing, and there are others where there has been relatively little action so far, and that we can aim to help get those started. So we have been thinking about how do we take those forward, particularly those that require that policy or legislative change, and what are the current advocacy opportunities that we can use to do that. So we've been engaging with the National Planning Policy Framework consultation around the various development protections that chalk streams could benefit from. We've been thinking about current government reviews, particularly the review into the water sector and the Water Framework Directive, chaired by Sir John Cunliffe, and government's review of the Environmental Improvement Plan. How can we push chalk stream messages within those areas? And then thinking about the future, we have various other bits of legislation on the horizon where we'll be able to advocate for those chalk stream messages. Along the bottom of the slide, you can see a key area of thinking for us has been the price review programme, and culminating with Ofwat's final determinations due next week, which will set out that forward programme for water company investment. So a whole host of things that we'd like to see action on there. And thinking beyond the constraints of the price review itself, how we can feed those into those future upcoming legislative opportunities. So how have we been working to do this? Well, a whole host, again, of techniques that we're using. And a key focus over the past few months has been engagement with MPs. We have a whole suite of new MPs with chalk streams in their constituencies, and so it's a really opportune moment to engage with them about the importance of what they have in their local patch. So we've been writing briefings, attending roundtables, and furnishing them with parliamentary questions that they can ask on our behalf. Similarly, with the price review, we've been engaging with water companies and with Ofwat, our most recent intervention being a letter to Ofwat's CEO, David Black, given the imminent financial decisions that we'll be receiving next week, in order to advocate for the things that we hope to see investment-wise for chalk streams through that price review programme. The planning reforms have been and also a significant part of our focus in recent months, headed up by the Save Our Chalk Streams campaign, established by a collective of wildlife trusts who are focusing that campaign around the planning protections that we'd like to see for chalk streams. So we've been engaging with the consultation and wrote in follow-up to ministers to set out the importance of securing protection for chalk streams through their planning reforms in order to ensure that the pressures facing our chalk streams do not butt up against government's ambitions for growth. We're also looking at the current Environmental Audit Committee inquiry into sustainable housing growth and thinking about how we can push forward some of those messages for chalk streams there. And thinking forward, we're expecting a planning and infrastructure bill, as well as further consultation around the NPPF in the new year. So a whole host of opportunities for us to push forward some of those actions from the chalk stream strategy, despite the unfortunate absence of the chalk stream recovery pack at the moment. And as you saw from the post-it notes on the slide earlier, plenty more work for us to do. So we're also looking at what other opportunities we can find to continue to push forward those chalk stream messages. I will now hand over to Alison.
Keeping to time really well, so this gives me a bit of space to talk to you. Just to say, there's one question in the Q&A. If anybody wants to, sorry, I'm trying to share the slides at the same time. Multitasking. If anybody wants to add
Alison, sorry to interrupt. Your sound's having the issue again that it was having the other week.
Oh, no.
I think you might just need to try and keep quite close to the computer.
Oh, well, shout out, Becca, if it happens again. Hopefully it comes and goes. Is it all right now?
Yeah, that's much better than it was a second ago. Yeah.
Excellent. And can you see this? Can you see my slides okay?
Yeah, that's all good. Right.
Okay. Do shout up if I disappear again. I don't know what's causing it. So yes, my point was, if you want to put any more questions in, please feel free. There's only one in there at the moment, which is a very good one, actually. So that's great. I just realised whilst we were talking that I'm not sure that between any of us, we put up a map of where the chalk streams are. And I saw there was a question in the chat as to whether there were any in a particular area. So I thought I would just quickly put in a slide to show where the chalk streams are. Pretty broad span, focus in the south and the east, but I've been lucky enough to go all the way up to Yorkshire to see some of the magnificent chalk streams up there too. So just a quick reminder of where they are. So with the time that's left for me. I was going to pick up on a few points that maybe haven't been raised and amplify a couple of things that have already been mentioned. And this is my kind of go-to slide for the summary of what the TalkStream strategy is all about. We've heard about the One Big Wish, and Ali's talked about the comms and advocacy around that. The red circles are around the things I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about. And for those who know I have a background in water resources, it's quite a surprise I'm not going to talk about sustainable abstraction, mainly because we're doing some work on sustainable abstraction to look at prioritising where actions should be happening first, and also thinking about sort of innovative approaches. I haven't got anything much to present about that at the moment, but in time, certainly there will be. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the other things on this slide. But also just to mention something again we haven't said about yet, which is that we have expert panels working with us as part of the strategy. So we have expert panels for water resources, which is chaired by Trevor Bishop. We have an expert panel for water quality, that's chaired by Peter Shaw from Southampton University. And we have another expert panel chaired by David Sear, who I know is on the call because I've seen him chastise Ali about something in the chat. And David chairs our physical habitat and ecology panel. So I'm going to talk about some of the work that we're doing there. Charles mentioned that I love playing with maps and spreadsheets. It doesn't make me a bad person. I just like data. And so this is just a bit of an example. And I apologise, there's a lot of dots on these maps. So I apologise if it's sending you a bit crazy. But just to give you a bit of an example of where having a bit of time to look in detail at a specific issue is proving to be really helpful. So the map on the left shows the agency's water quality monitoring data. It's just a very simple analysis of the summary of averaging phosphate, orthophosphate in river samples for all the samples the agency's got across chalk streams. And on the right is a map showing what I've been able to glean so far about the phosphate limits on wastewater treatment works, where they already exist, where they're planned in AMP7 and where they're planned in AMP8. And that data set's being updated, which is why I've got the big sort of flag across the middle of it. And I guess you can really start to see some interesting patterns in there, can't you? And it brings home the point that Charles made earlier, that the designated rivers, such as Attest and the Itchen in sort of central southern Hampshire and the Avon, they tend to have lower levels of phosphate. And when you look across to the map at the right, you might start to understand why that, or partially why that might be, which relates into the fact that a lot of the wastewater treatment works already have pea stripping. And I've just circled an area that's quite interesting. So that's the River Wey that runs from Alton in Hampshire. And you can see on the left a series of big red dots indicating high phosphate concentration. And on the right, you can see that there are plans within AMP7 to put pea stripping in at works along that reach. So it'll be interesting to see if that starts to change. And I guess the focus for this analysis really is to start looking in a bit more depth at where we might need to do work to push for PR29 investment for works at headwater wastewater treatment works, where nutrient levels can be quite high, but the population equivalent is quite low. So using this data, we're going to align it with, there's a lot of citizen science information as well. So I know, for example, on the River Pang, there's been a lot of interest in the works there and citizen science data showing a higher level of sort of detail than the agency's monitoring. So by combining lots of data sets and working with the local groups in the areas, we can start to put a really strong evidence base for where work is needed. So this is just one example, but there are other areas where we're looking at data too. We're also looking at all of the sort of forever chemicals, working with Rob in the Rivers Trust. There's a lot of work looking at chemical pollution as well. Now, Charles has already mentioned some of this. I just wanted to touch on chalk stream projects. So Charles has mentioned the CaBA flagship projects. I've been updating a story map in our chalk stream hub where you can see updates for the current status of those projects, and I'm going to keep that live. So if you want to check back in and see what's happening with them, should be able to keep that fairly up to date. So the CaBA flagship projects represent 10 projects across the chalk area, but there are also many other projects. So I've mentioned there, and Charles did, the landscape recovery schemes are very exciting. Species Survival Fund is funding some big work, particularly on the Lee. Heritage Lottery Fund has also delivered some great projects. And on the right, thanks to the Environment Agency team for providing me some data about the work that the Chalk Partnership Fund has been delivering. So over £2 million invested in 2 years. And the bottom pie chart there shows you the sorts of projects that it's delivering. You know, the big bits of the pie being fish passage, monitoring data and evidence, and morphology, wetland restoration. And this ties back to the physical habitat subgroup that we're running, the expert panel. in that we're really keen to learn from these projects and also help support these projects to really raise the ambition to deliver more for chalk streams. And one big element of the flagship projects is that they're funded over at least over 5 years, preferably over 10 years, which gives you a real chance to be more ambitious because you have a secure source of funding. So we're working in that panel to provide, it's been called a river restoration guide. It's not going to be a big fat manual. And this is where sort of building a community of practitioners comes in. We really want to work with people, raise ambition, provide the tools that are needed to help people with that. And then the other project I've been spending a lot of time on is the chalk stream map. So you may say we already have one, which we do. We have the Natural England Priority Habitat Map. What I'm working on is taking all of the effort that went into that alongside the inventory of chalk streams that Charles had developed for the CaBA project, and basically turning that all into one big sort of mega map, and adding extra useful information. So at the bottom there, you can see an example of a winterbourne, and the map next to it shows that what we hope to be able to do is we'd better split out our chalk streams into perennially flowing chalk streams and winterbournes. It's useful to know where these are on a planning context in terms of managing winterbournes, and also to maybe record other information as well. I'm really open if people have got ideas. It's a really good time to talk to me if you've got ideas about mapping, and I'm meeting with a few people over the next week before I really sort of get started in earnest on this. So it's not sort of reinventing the wheel. It's taking what we've already got and making it even better and even more useful. But the end part of my slot is really, and this is where we get to, you have to wake up again and interact with us a bit more. So what I'm really interested in is building a community of people who care about chalk streams and who can work with us to deliver all these things that we've been telling you about. So in terms of what sort of the deal is, the support from the CaBA team. So I think we're really keen to support by providing these sort of national data sets. If I can tidy up that wastewater treatment works data set, I think that would be useful for lots of groups working in their local areas. We can provide emails or whatever to update you. But the first question I was going to ask, and Becca, if you could pull up the poll, please. We're hoping that you're enjoying this webinar. We quite like the idea of quite short, focused events to try and share information. And in time, what would be great if people actually also come along with us and present work that they're doing. And we think that there's lots of opportunity to run further webinars. And great, you're already on the case again. We're really interested. You can choose more than one. If you were going to attend future webinars, what sort of ones would you be interested in? And I'm really pleased to see that river restoration is getting a lot of votes, because we already have a plan to run a river restoration webinar in the new year. And to learn more about that community and how we can best support them. So it's great to see so many votes coming in for that. Thank you. And lots of others. So this is telling me that you have a real interest in finding out more and maybe some more targeted webinars around particular themes. Citizen science is a really popular space at the moment. We're also doing work trying to understand more about sort of agricultural runoff and highways pollution. I'm sure those would be themes that people would be interested in. And do please put things in the chat. If you've got a great idea about something you think would be interesting to a lot of people, tell us, and we can consider whether we can put that on. So next year, I'd like to run more of these. Okay, if you want to end that one, Becca, I think we've got some really good information in there. And then the second thing I wanted to ask you about is there has long been talk about organising some sort of annual conference or an event, and it's quite a big undertaking for us to do that. So it would take me a lot of time with support from others. Big Chalk, who's another group that we work with, and I know that a couple of people are on the call from Big Chalk. They're a sort of landscape-wide programme looking at chalk grasslands as well as chalk streams and other chalk habitats. They ran a fantastic event in September, but I know it did take an awful lot of organising. So if we were to do it, I'd need to really know that you want it. There are other options. We could just do a national event, but locate it in the north in one year and bring it down to the south another year. We can do sort of a longer webinar. That suits some people, maybe not others. But yeah, really interested in your ideas on any event where we bring people together, or maybe we just do it around topics. Again, you can put any thoughts in the chat, and when we come to the end of the event, there's a survey where you can just type in any ideas that you've got. So it'd be great to know your thoughts. There's no clear winner so far, it looks like, on that. It seems like people like different sorts of events. So I think might have to go away and mull over a little bit more on what we do with that. I'll leave that one running a little bit longer whilst I just say about how you can help. So we're really interested to build our evidence base. So the work that Ali talks about, talking to politicians and talking to people who change and make policy, it's really great to have examples of real life things where we can get those MPs engaged. So the roundtable event I attended on Monday, Olivia Bailey is the MP for the River Pang. She was really keen to want to do more to help support the River Pang. So if you've got an active MP who really cares about your local chalk stream, do tell us. We can then maybe help build that relationship and maybe try and help elevate sort of chalk stream issues within Parliament. And one of the outcomes of the meeting on Monday was potentially to have an MP drop-in session where MPs can come and find out more about chalk streams. So tell us about that. Tell us about great things you're doing. We're all up for sharing case studies. And potentially, if you want to host a field visit, show people what you're doing or present at a webinar, please do shout. So we can end that one there, Becca. I think it's really split between what sort of event people like. So there's no clear consensus. So we'll have to go away and think about that one. So at this stage, we're going to put up a questionnaire at the end of the call, which I'll mention right at the end. But at this point, I'll hand back to Charles to see whether we've got any more questions appeared in the Q&A and whether there are any questions for the panel that we can answer before we close the call in 10 minutes. So thank you very much. Charles, can I hand it back to you?
Hi there. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yeah, absolutely. I've been tapping a few answers away in the Q&A, but the ones in the chat, I'm afraid I can see the questions, but I can't necessarily answer them specifically because I can't see how to reply to the individual questions. So, I mean, subjects in the chat that have been raised, which have been really fascinating. Mike Blackmore asked about the impact of groundwater ingress, which of course is part and parcel of the sort of raw sewage crisis. And Kate Heppel has done some fascinating work, which people might like to know about on the River Chess, showing the cumulative impact of those groundwater infiltration discharges over time. Someone raised the idea of controlling signal crayfish with genetic modification, which of course is a phrase that always gets people concerned. I understand there's a process called direct inherited gender bias. Someone's added to what I've said about that, but Rosalind Institute, I attended a presentation about that. It is quite an interesting technology, no doubt quite controversial, but a river like the Bure in Norfolk is absolutely destroyed by signal crayfish. It's a particular problem, I think, for the kind of slightly flashier chalk streams, which are a little bit more incised into the landscape, and the signal crayfish just love burrowing into those banks. They burrow to a certain depth. The banks basically develop a crack laterally along the edge and collapse into the river and set off a vicious cycle of widening and sediment gathering in the riverbed. So I'm very aware of the problem of signal crayfish. Let's see, what else have we got? Someone has asked about where are you with validating any priority chalk stream mapping? Well, Alison could talk a little bit about that, but I know we've been talking to Natural England and Environment Agency about the chalk stream map. There are sort of two different functions, really, in a way. There's the chalk stream map from an academic point of view, and then there's a chalk stream map from a policy point of view, and they are sort of subtly different. And of course, the perennial issue of where I see someone in the side chat asked, where does the chalk stream end? That's a very good one. I think that, well, David Sear has proposed a sort of base flow index kind of cutoff of around 0.66, which is getting into rivers where there's a much, much higher surface flow component. So your classic chalk streams are base flow indexes of at least over 0.85, but often over 0.9. They're your classic pure chalk streams, which are absolutely unambiguous. But then you've got your mixed geology chalk streams and your scarp chalk streams, which often rise at the base of chalk and flow onto older geologies. So the important thing with that whole map is it's a spectrum. You know, there are rivers that are absolutely undoubtedly 100% pure chalk streams, the Tichborne, the Candover, the Upper Test, the Upper Itchen. There are rivers like the Froome, the Great Stour in Kent, which start on green sand, the Nadder is another, and then move on to chalk. And then there are rivers that start right at the base of chalk, but almost immediately flow onto other geologies. And it's a squirrely question, what is a chalk stream and what isn't. And then what happens is you get to the bottom of these huge catchments like the Colne. It's miles off the chalk. It's officially a chalk stream, but it's very heavily modified around Heathrow Airport. And is it a chalk stream anymore? I don't feel able to answer that question. But that's the sort of issue with the map. So yeah, we are working on a map, and we do have one. Now, what else have we got?
Charles, can I butt in and answer a question, an interesting one I've seen on the chat from Martin around chemicals? Alison alluded to it. I think it's a huge issue. Not a single English river is in good chemical status, and that's on the back of monitoring just no more than about 45 out of literally hundreds, if not thousands. So it's a really good point by Martin. One point, we will run a webinar or two in time, but just to say, we've done a huge amount in terms of data collection, analysis and advocacy as a Rivers Trust, but I think around chemicals, we released some analysis just last week on neonicotinoids that hit the media, but PFAS, pet parasiticides too. So there's a huge amount out there. So we're doing a lot in terms of advocacy. Too much to answer here, but I'm happy to, directly liaise with Martin on that. But I think the whole issue is, one, goes back to my brief presentation about empowerment and, strength in numbers. So I think the whole issue of chalk streams, we can have a huge voice here around chemicals, and there's a huge amount we can do. And yes, it's complicated, and the issue really needs to be tackled at source. So I'll stop there on that one. I just wanted, sorry, if I can, one more. Tim flagged something around citizen science. Again, perhaps Tim, if you could email one of us, because there are some answers here, I think, about collating and storing data around citizen science and making the most of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. I've seen a question in the chat about practical learning events from Andrew Morsley, and then Ruth from Lincolnshire. Hi, Ruth, has also added something similar. Yeah, I think there's absolutely, David Sear and I have been talking a lot about a sort of practical learning sort of workshops, particularly with regard to chalk stream restoration. So get in touch with myself or David about that. We're trying to sort of get a bellwether for how much interest there would be. Ruth, you were sort of talking about perhaps an extra subgroup along the lines of the old BAP group, which of course is where a lot of this chalk stream work started, to help share knowledge, learning, data, funding ideas. Yeah, okay, we'll take that idea away. I think that's really interesting. We'll talk to Alison, but by all means, drop us an email as well if you've got some thoughts about how that might work. Alison, do you want to talk a little bit about the map and when we might be able to publish our version, or how you think that's going to work?
I was really optimistic I'd have it done by December, and then it started to get a lot more complicated than I first thought, as you might imagine. Kath asked a question about mapping the winterbourne reaches. Kath, that's something I'm working with agency people and others on. So I'm really keen to get data from local groups working on chalk streams, so that what we're producing is matching their understanding of what chalk streams is. But we're also developing a bit of a consistent understanding across the country, so that it's a useful, consistent map. So yeah, I'm really up for anybody sending me any maps they've got of what they believe are their chalk streams, particularly the winterbourne reaches. There was an MSc student at Southampton University who's mapped them all, so I've got some data already. I think it's probably going to be a case of having a sort of like an early version of the map may be available for people to start commenting on, maybe as early as kind of March time, put some ideas out there for groups as a draft map and say, what do you think? Is this helpful? But at this stage, as I said, you can influence and you can say, right, I think it would be really useful if we recorded this as part of the new map. And I see that Siri, hi Siri, Siri's asked a question about how it links to the priority habitat map. I'm really keen to talk to Natural England about that, because there's no desire to produce a proliferation of maps doing similar but not quite the same things. So I really want to talk to Natural England about that. Unfortunately, the lady who's been dealing with it isn't available at the moment, but I will do that so that we're linking up.
It's absolutely wonderful how many questions are coming in. I feel so sorry that we can't answer them all in the time available, but it's a real signal of how people care. And Stuart Singleton-White, in a way, has summed that up with policy changes coming down the track, as Ali has shown, a tone from government that's concerning in terms of potential direction. And we need to do more work with our MPs to show there's real concern. Absolutely, thank you for making that point, Stuart. And of course, Ali is chairing the ENGO group. So I don't know if Ali, if you've got any thoughts on that sort of lobbying component of our work.
Yeah, so just briefly, someone mentioned the previous APPG, the All-Party Parliamentary Group on chalk streams, which sort of fell, as all APPGs do when there was a change of government. The rules on establishing these groups has changed, but there is the potential that we could look at restarting that group. There's also a water pollution APPG supported by River Action, so we will definitely be using that as a route to engage with MPs over chalk stream issues. There is a water APPG as well, which is a water industry facilitated group. But again, a lot of the issues that we need to think about with regards to chalk streams are water industry related, abstraction, sewage discharges, and so on. So we can use that group as well. And even if we don't establish a new APPG on chalk streams specifically, we'll be engaging directly with those MPs in chalk stream constituencies. So yeah, a lot of interest already from some of those new MPs, and a really good opportunity to engage with them when they're sort of freshly in post and wanting to find out about, you know, what their local constituents really care about.
Yeah, I think, Charles, I think we'll probably have to draw it to a bit of a close there. We've got to 10:30. It's flown by. I just wanted to say thank you very much to my fellow presenters for taking the time to tell you about what they're working on. I found it really interesting. I always learn something new. It's really great to see all the questions and comments that have come in. Those do get saved, so we can look at them.
Lean closer, Alison. Lean closer to your mic. It's doing its thing.
Oh, sorry. I need to.
No, we can hear you now. That's good. That's good.
Thank you, Charles. Yes, so thank you to everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend. Just to say that there will be a really short survey, and when I say short, it is super short. It's a free text box to give us any ideas that you have got. But importantly, we'd really love to better get in touch with people with ideas for future webinars. So we'd really like you to be happy to share your email addresses with us so that we can get in touch with you. We won't be getting in touch loads, don't worry, so that we can tell you about future events, which there does seem to be an appetite for. And we'll look back through the questions and the comments you've made, and that will help shape where we go next with all of this. There is a website, which I've put up on the screen there. There is a general email address if you want to get in touch. And we are updating the website and trying to put more up-to-date information on there, and in time sharing some of those national data sets, which hopefully will be helpful to others as well. So just remains to say thank you very much. Thank you to Becca and Emily as well at the Rivers Trust for organising the event, and we hope to see you on another one before too long. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Thank you, everybody. Just want to highlight, and so David Sear has made the point about physical habitat, and Mike's always great with a catchphrase, free the chalk streams. Couldn't agree more, you two. It's physical habitat must not be underestimated. And there's a lot we can do there. So thanks, it's great to talk to everybody. Really enjoyed it. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. And thank you, Alison and Rob and Ali for doing such a great job. And Rebecca for holding the fort in the background with all her savvy, know-how and calm support. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.